how to develop your tech sales career. Thank you everyone for joining. So my name's Alex Gasson, and I'm the CEO of Delta V. And today, things we're going to be covering on this call is, first off, why I work in sales, understanding the sales landscape so that you can make informed career decisions, to talk about specific roles in the world of sales and the overall go-to-market landscape, talk in particular around the SDR role and where you go to from there and how you map your career from there. And then also longer term, just to think about general principles for how you manage career and what you should be doing and what you should not be doing as you try to build a career in sales. For this call, I would love it if it can be super interactive, and feel free to put your cameras on as well so that I'm not just talking into a kind of black hole here and hoping that people are listening. It would be great to have lots of interaction on the call. And so if at any point please ask lots of questions. And if you want to ask questions, just raise your hand, hitting the little hand button at the bottom. And Marissa will unmute you so that you can ask your question. But please interrupt me, and the more questions you ask, the better. And I'm sure the more value you'll get out of this session. In the chat, also feel free to just, if there are any kind of burning topics that you want to find out about, please fire away as well. But more questions the better, so please don't be shy on this call, and also don't be shy to switch your cameras on either. Okay, so before I dive into today's topic, just a little bit of an intro to myself. So I'm the CEO and founder of Delta V. What we do as a business is we build and run SDR teams for fintech and enterprise software companies. We're based in Cape Town, South Africa, but all of our customers sit in places like the UK and Europe, and they're generally selling highly complex, expensive solutions into complex enterprise organizations. One of the big things for me in terms of setting up this business was that I think, to a large part, particularly in the South African context, sales is done really badly. And I really wanted to create this vehicle for taking kind of amazing raw talent and then equipping people with the skill set and the tool set to have amazing sales careers. And that's really kind of a fundamental part of our mission as Delta V. So you get to work in Cape Town, you get to work with these great international companies, learn a huge amount, both through our internal training and also through the exposure that you get to other companies, and then not just work in the South African context, but actually working on a global context. In terms of myself, I'm a surfer, I'm a skier, as you can see from the photo on here. I also coach judo, which I've been doing since I was 12. I founded my first company in 2009, which was a recruitment business, and I exited that in 2015, and that business is still going strong. And I founded Delta V in 2020, so we've been going for 5 years now. And overall, I've got about 15 years in sales leadership experience. But I think for this session as well, one of the things to point out is that I think that to a large extent, I feel like I bumbled my way through my sales career. And there are many things I could and would have done differently in hindsight. And hopefully I can share some of those learnings with you guys on this call so that you don't go and just bump your head in the same ways that I have during my career. So just a reminder, guys, great to have you all with us. Please feel free to stop and ask questions at any point, or just raise your hand and then Marissa can unmute you, or you can just add questions in the chat that you want answered. All right, so first question we should be asking is, in terms of a sales career, it's why work in sales in the first place? And I think if we are looking at in the context of saying, hey, I want to go and work in tech, essentially, if you're wanting to go and work in a tech company, there are kind of broadly two paths that you go down. The one is the product path, where you are potentially a developer or a project manager or a BA, and you're involved in the creation of the product. And the other path is go to market, where what you're doing is you're taking the solutions to market and getting them solved. What happens in many tech companies is they start up being very product focused, and the bulk of the organization is focused around kind of, the dev organization that's building the product. But as they grow and mature, the focus of the organization shifts increasingly away from product and more to the go-to-market organization. So you'll see the very large kind of B2B software companies, they'll have larger sales organizations, and they do have sort of developer and technical organizations, because their focus is really about distribution and selling product. And those are your kind of two entry points generally into a tech business. You're either going you're either on more on the technical side, or you're on the go-to-market side, which is really marketing and sales. And so if you're wanting to work in tech and you're not technical, generally the sales and marketing route is the route that you're going to go to, and then sales is like one of those specific options. Jackie, you have a question, please fire away. Marissa, will you unmute Jackie? Sorry, it seems like we have a technical issue here.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Jackie. Great to have you on the call.
Cool. Thank you so much. I don't know if it's too soon to ask this kind of question. However, I want to know what's the difference between selling a product and selling a service, because I previously have sold a service and now I am going into a new company to sell a product. What is your...
That's a great question, and it's actually something that I didn't cover in this presentation, but it's a really important point, because selling a product and selling a service is really different, because a product is a much more tangible thing, which has kind of very clear kind of features and benefits that you can sell on. It's generally much easier to sell a product than it is to sell a service. The thing about a service, it generally involves people, and a service is often is variable. So unless a service is really well packaged up, it's much harder to sell a service if you are not the founder or have a real deep subject matter expert. So generally, you can be, I think earlier on in your career, you can be more successful selling a product than necessarily a service, I would say. Like if you take an accounting firm as an example, the people who are selling, you think like a PwC or a KPMG, the guys who are actually making the sales are the partners, who are very senior people who have been in the long business for a long time. It's not people at earlier stages of their careers. And so I think that selling a product, you've got a much more straightforward sales process would be the big difference, because you've got a thing that you're selling rather than a service which is variable. Does that help, Jackie?
Yes, thank you so much.
Cool. So talking about kind of a career in sales. So in South Africa, sales is very much, I think, seen as a bad word, which is one of the things that I'm trying to change with my business. But for me personally, I think fundamentally it's one of the most important, or the most important thing you need to build great organizations. So, if you choose a career in sales, fundamentally what you're doing is you are essentially playing a key role in building and growing businesses, because if people are not giving you money, you don't have a business. What you get out of it is that you learn about people, you learn about companies, you learn about markets, you get to find and provide solutions for complex problems. In terms of your career, you've got to realize that you are also developing the scarcest and most valuable skill set. So I've been on calls with CEO networks, and they'll say, "Sheesh, I thought finding developers was hard until I started trying to find good salespeople." And really, say, you can think about sales as a profession, and if you are good at it, you have developed the scarcest and one of the most valuable skill sets out there. one of the great things about sales as well is that you get to directly see the impact of your work in terms of, hey, I did this, we signed a client and that had this impact. Obviously, there's also a payoff for this as well. Like a lot of sales is hard grind, and the payoff for that is that you should be making really good money. And the top salespeople, you should be out earning any of your peers. I mean, give you an example. I know guys in their early 30s who are working with doing complex enterprise sales where they're making 3-4 million rand a year, on a base of like, maybe they've got themselves to the point where a company will give them a base of over 1 million rand, but then in terms of commission, they're making another couple of bar a year, and you'll be outperforming and out earning anybody else that you know. And then what you see if you look at large technology companies is that the people who end up leading business units or leading the companies themselves, especially in more mature businesses, are very often coming from a sales background, and they are then running, so we'll see people who are they're running like the organization for a region, or they're running an organization for a business line, and they've come from a sales background rather than being technical and having been developers. So your starting point might be, being an individual contributor, but because over time you can ultimately get to the point where you are, really leading business or leading business divisions or business units through a career in sales. It's probably also worth mentioning why not to choose a career in sales. So a lot of people who are good at sales are a scarce breed. And a lot of people, one of the things people don't like about sales is the accountability, because it's normally very clear if you're winning or losing. Okay, and a lot of people are not comfortable with being in a position where it's 100% clear whether they're doing a good job or not. Either you're closing deals or you're not. Either you're hitting target or you're not. And if you're not comfortable with that sort of thing, then you probably don't want to be having a career in sales. And that's one of the big problems with the South African kind of sales environment, is that a lot of people kind of choose sales as a last choice instead of realizing that this is a fantastic career. If you are good at, it's a fantastic career and profession that you can build for yourself if you're good at sales. Feel free to add comments on your own opinions about why to choose a career in sales as well. If I've missed anything, just fire away in the chat. So the next thing I'm going to dive into is just talking about the sales landscape, just to give some context around how you want to think about roles and decisions that you make when you are kind of picking companies to work for and solutions to sell. So I think the first thing that you want to be thinking about is kind of sales complexity. And you've got, and you have a spectrum of complexity in sales. And so I've broken it down into two areas. So one is transactional sales, which is where a company is selling a simple and well understood product. Generally, this also aligns with low deal sizes, high volumes, and short sales cycles. And typically, the types of organizations you're making these sales to would be, you'd either be selling stuff to individuals, you'd be selling to small business, and possibly to mid-market. And what I mean by low deal size, we're talking probably deal sizes of anywhere below, say, like 150,000 Rand, or, what's that, $7,500 type of thing. The other end of the spectrum is like complex sales, where we are selling complicated products, where you've got large deal sizes. You're going to do a lower volume of deals and you have long sales cycles. And typically you're going to be selling into mid-market or large enterprise organizations. So, a complicated product could be like a complex payment system, or it could be a complex accounting system or tax calculation engine, those sorts of things. Deal sizes, we're talking anywhere from $30,000 up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And generally what you're doing is you're doing lower volumes of deals, And then also because you're selling complex products and people are having to make, large buying decisions, we're talking about long sales cycles. So, I'd say a short sales cycle would be anywhere from 1 to 3 months, and long sales cycles, we're talking anywhere from probably 6 months to 24 months. And then the types of organizations that you're selling to are, if we're talking enterprise, think about your MTNs, your ShopRites, your FNBs, your big banks. And then in that world, you are having to make that sale, you're having to navigate a very complicated buying journey that your buyer has and deal with many, many stakeholders along the way. Any questions on this? Okay, so moving on. So another key thing that you want to be thinking about in terms of understanding the sales landscape is kind of types of solutions that you can be selling. So there's vertical and there's horizontal solutions, and it's very useful or important for you to actually understand what you're doing. So a vertical solution is generally a solution that's sold into a very specific industry. So for instance, a banking system that gets sold into a bank, or insurance and policy management system that insurers use to manage all their policies, or e-commerce, like say the payment gateway that e-commerce businesses use to accept payments. The great thing about vertical solutions is that there's generally less competition because it requires deep domain knowledge to produce these solutions in the first place. But often you have a much smaller addressable market. So if you say, hey, we only sell to insurance companies in South Africa, you probably only have 100 to 200 insurance companies that you can go and make sales to. And then typically, like the unit that gets sold, whether it is a seat or something like that, is a much higher unit cost if you're selling a vertical solution. Horizontal solutions are solutions that are sold across a range of businesses, but are sold in specific business functions. So for instance, like selling accounting systems into a finance team, or selling marketing automation like HubSpot into marketing teams. So generally these companies, these are generally, you have a high degree of competition. So it could be harder to make sales, but you've got a much larger addressable market because you can sell to many, many businesses. And then often what will happen is you need to sell more volume because you've got a lower unit cost. So like a user license for, I'm trying to think, like a project management tool is going to be, sort of $10, $20. While if you are looking at, selling complex insurance platform, per kind of seat or licenses could be in the hundreds of dollars. So that's just important stuff, kind of background to understand the rest of kind of the items that I'm going to cover. But when you are picking a role that you're going to go and do, it's important to understand the dynamics around this and figure out, hey, am I selling a vertical solution? Am I selling a horizontal solution? What are the implications for this in terms of my ability to be successful and to go and sell? So if you are building a career in sales, the entry point into most sales organizations, particularly in tech, is going to be the sales development representative role, called SDRs or BDRs. And it is a great place to start your career because, and I'll dig into this a bit more shortly, but you develop some fundamental skills that are essential for being an elite seller. What you do as an SDR, like just to kind of, what you're typically doing in the role is that your job is to generate sales pipeline, which essentially means meetings with the right people at the right companies that are booked into the calendars of account executives who are responsible for closing deals. Practically what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is you are doing research to identify the right types of companies and the right people in those to reach out to. You are then doing outreach using phone, email, LinkedIn, engaging those people, qualifying them and getting them to the point where they are interested to find out more about your solution or product. And you're then handing this meeting over to an account executive who's going to take that opportunity forward and hopefully close the deal from it. So if you are thinking about getting into sales or you are in an SDR role, I think it's really important to think about what you get out of it. And what we do in my business is we are 100% an SDR organization where we build SDR teams for companies. And I think in many cases, the SDR role has a bit of a bad rep in terms of people think it's at very low level, it's very entry level, and people are trying to get out of this role as quickly as possible. And I think that they're really doing this role a massive disservice when they think about it this way, because there are a huge number of things that you get out of this role. And also, if you think about it, it is fundamentally one of the most important roles in a sales organization, because if you don't have sales opportunities, you don't have anything to close. And so it's one of the hardest roles and one of the most important roles to do. And so it really is kind of a critical role to be performing, and it is a role that should be highly respected in terms of what you're doing. Now, what do you get out of being an SDR? So the first thing that you fundamentally develop as a skill set is pipeline generation. This is the skill that only elite sellers possess, and it is a fundamental skill that anybody who is a top seller who's earning millions of rands a year has developed, and probably only 8 to 10% of people in sales are actually good at pipeline generation. So if you are in an SDR role and you're good at it, you are setting yourself up for an amazing career, because you are developing the fundamental skill that's required to be successful. You also, because you're having an SDR, it's a high volume role in the sense that you are reaching out to a lot of people, you're making a lot of calls, you're having a lot of interactions, you get rapid learning and skills development. And so you learn a lot around communication, how to do research, how to do discovery, how to listen to what people are saying and hear what they're saying, how to handle objections, how to close. You're not necessarily closing deals, but you are getting people to part with their time in exchange for you getting to throw them out your product. So you're learning those fundamental skills. How do I get people to agree to stuff, which is essentially what closing is. You learn persistence, you learn resilience, and you learn how to manage stakeholders. And those will be stakeholders both externally in terms of the prospects that you're reaching out to, but also internal in the business is you are having to manage internal stakeholders. So those are all like really important skills that you develop by being an SDR. It's also an incredible vehicle for generating knowledge. And so in an SDR role, you are going to be taking a product or service to market. So you develop knowledge around that. You are going to be working in an industry, you're going to be focusing on certain industries, so you start to develop industry knowledge. You also develop market knowledge. So for instance, say you are running campaigns across Europe like we do for our customers, SDRs in our business, they learn all about a range of markets and the dynamics in those markets and how they operate. And you also learn sales process, which is key for kind of understanding what to be doing. Other things you get exposure to and learn about: messaging, what works, what doesn't, critical for sales and marketing. You learn around technology, sales, automation, technology, how to use them. And then I think the other critical thing that you get out of being an SDR, which is it is kind of a non-negotiable for the rest of your sales career, is that you develop a track record. And when I say a track record, is you need to have a track record of performance, which means that you are hitting your target. And if you have a consistent track record of performance of hitting your target, that is something that you can carry with you across multiple roles, where you have created a huge amount of credibility for any potential employer, because you have demonstrated you are somebody who can go and make things happen. Go for it, Jackie. Just let Marissa unmute you there again. Marissa, can you? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself there. So I do have two questions. Okay, but in terms of the SDR,
yeah,
how do you ensure the pipeline that you generate isn't just full, but actually full of qualified opportunities that actually can convert into revenue?
So it's a great question. So I think that part of that is how you are enabled and set up. And so, and I go into this a little bit later because I'm going to be talking about how you pick the companies you work for. But really, like what you want to be, the starting point is that you want to be working for a company that understands what is our ideal customer profile in terms of what is the right type of organization for us to try and sell to look like. And that means they must have made multiple sales to that type of company before, so they know that this is like, and actually they likely have a good opportunity to make sales. And then the next step down is say understanding who are the right people in these organizations to be talking to, and that is a right person in an organization. Your target persona is, it should be people who have the right authority to actually make buying decisions and solve problems, and then people who have the problem that you and your solution or service can solve. And so a company that you're going and working for should have a very clear definition of an ideal customer profile, and also the buyer personas that you want to be targeting for booking meetings with. And so and then what you want is a clear qualification framework which says a meeting that gets generated should only be with, say, the head of marketing at a bank that has more than 1,000 employees, and they're turning up at this meeting because they want to explore marketing automation solutions. As an example, that's like what a qualified meeting could look like. And so the critical thing is you need to make sure that you are targeting the right companies, you're targeting the right people in those companies, you're asking them the right questions, and you actually are equipped with a framework so that you know what counts as good. And you only focus on that.
Okay, then that kind of answers my second question, because I wanted to know, how do you know the ratios in terms of prospecting, at the top of the funnel, and then what's feeding into that qualified leads, and then the ratio that you need to hit to reach your target?
I mean, it depends on the industry you're working in and so on. But I mean, we find that if you're trying to book meetings and secure meetings, like the benchmark that we work on is that for every 33 people that you reach out to, you should be booking one meeting. So that's for 33 people that you've added to an outbound sequence or cadence. One of those should turn into a meeting. Ideally, it's better than that, but that's like the baseline that you should be targeting. And this is assuming you're reaching out to large enterprises or mid-market companies, not small business, where you should have a much higher conversion rate.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So this is what you kind of get out of being an SDR role, in an SDR role. And I think that it's important to understand the context for this in terms of kind of what a larger go-to-market organization looks like. Because in an SDR role, you are one of many. You can see I think if you look on the left-hand side, it is this. You can see it's one of the circles here, SDR, BDR, but it's one of many roles in the go-to-market organization, but it's often the entry-level role for you. So it could be that, you go and join a company in an SDR role, you learn the business, you spend a year or two in that role, and then there might be, if you decide, hey, sales is not for me, or you could be just say, I want to do something different. There are other opportunities in the go-to-market organization that you can go to. So on the one hand, you can go down the kind of sales career path. So that would mean that you go from being an SDR to being an account executive to maybe being a sales manager. The other option, you could go from being an SDR to being an SDR manager. Or if you want to stay kind of customer-facing sales, but not really having to close deals, then you would go to account manager. But they're also, outside of the sales path, being in an SDR role opens up a range of other options for you as well. So, and that is things like sales or revenue operations, marketing, or even moving into customer support or customer success. So here's a kind of summary of kind of where you can go to, and a lot of this kind of is, and this slide is really based around what you enjoy doing or what gets you excited. So if you are keen on strategy, targeting, messaging, Then you go down more the marketing route and look at the roles like demand gen, product marketing, or sales enablement. If you decide, hey, what I really like is like tech and systems and automation, you can go to revenue or sales operations or marketing operations, where you're supporting the sales organization or marketing organization's use of technology. If you enjoy managing relationships, not that keen on closing, then you can go to account management or customer success. If you like closing deals, then you go become an account executive. And if you like to train, coach, mentor, or help others succeed, then SDR leadership is also an obvious next step that you can take from being in an SDR role. All right, so covered all those items. So now talking about kind of how to manage your career. And I think that it is useful to frame this in terms of, I think, one, I myself have been in a role where I've been in roles where I'm employed and I'm an individual contributor working in businesses. But I've also been a sales leader for the last 15 years, and I'm a CEO of 2 businesses. And so my perspective is also from not just from what I wanted when I was an individual contributor being employed, but what does it look like when you are a hiring manager or you're trying to build businesses? What are you actually looking for in people as well? And I think that's really important to think about. It's on the one hand, like for sure, like in your career, you need to be thinking about what do I want? But you also need to be thinking from the other point of view of like, what makes me attractive to potential employers, and how do I manage my career to set myself up to be as successful as possible? So I think the first thing that if you're managing career and you think about what to do in sales, like you live and die by your track record, and one of the key things you want to be doing is creating a track record for yourself. So there's 2 things to that. One is spending sufficient time in a role so that you create a track record of having career stability. And the second one is having a track record of meeting and achieving and exceeding targets, and doing that on a consistent basis. Now, the thing in time and role is like is a really important one. And early on in your career, a year, 2 years feels like a long time. I can remember that. When you get a little bit older and grayer, like I am now, you realize that really a year or 2 is like really not a lot of time in the context of, your career. And it's really important to create a stable career history for yourself. So when I look at CVs and I see people who've bounced from one role to the next, and they're in a role for 6 months, and then in a role for a year and a half, and then they're in a role for 3 months, generally it says to me as a hiring manager, it says this person is either not good at picking the companies that they go and work for, and so they pick like places that are not a great place to work, and then they leave, or once they join a company, they're not good at staying in the role because they are, there's some issues around how they perform. Generally in sales, people are bouncing roles often when they're struggling to perform. So that's my immediate thing when I look at a CV where people are not having, good time and role before moving roles. The next thing to kind of do is to position yourself to take advantage of opportunities. And that is linked very much to time and role, because everybody wants to move faster. Everybody wants to move, say, from an SDR role into an AE role. But those opportunities are not always there. Or people want to move into a leadership role in a business. Those opportunities are not always there. But the longer time you spend with a company, the better you are positioned to actually go and take those opportunities when they come. And the reason for that is that if you move jobs, you basically have to start from scratch again in terms of building your credibility. Nobody's going to hire you from being an individual contributor to being a manager in another business. And so they're going to hire you to be an individual. They're going to take you as being an individual contributing salesperson in one business. You're going to join as an individual contributing salesperson in another business. And you're going to have to start from scratch again in terms of establishing your credibility in that organization. before they go, right, where we can hand this person opportunities, or we can give them opportunities to do things. So again, so positioning yourself to take advantage of opportunities is really about create a reputation, spend time and role, build trust in an organization, and then you will find that opportunities open up over time. And this is where this thing around time, again, is like a key thing. You'll find that 3 months, 6 months in the greater scheme of things is really a tiny amount of time. What you also want to do is focus. So when you start working in a particular industry, you want to develop, you often will develop valuable specialist skills and knowledge that are related to that domain or vertical, or even just working on a specific type of deal size. And what you want to be doing is you want to be building on those. And so, I'll give you an example. We had someone in our business who was super successful as an SDR. He was working on a customer of ours who sells very complex financial technology into the world's largest organizations, the biggest banks, the biggest retailers, the biggest telcos. When he left our business, he went to go and work for a company that sold marketing automation solutions to 15 to 20 person startups. He threw away all that knowledge that he had developed around fintech. He threw away all that knowledge that he had developed about selling into very large, complex organizations, and then threw away all that knowledge that he had developed in terms of working on ultimately deals which are worth, millions or even tens of millions of rands. And so it's very important to realize, hey, what's the value that I've kind of captured, or what are the valuable skills and knowledge that I've already developed, and how do I take those further, as opposed to chopping and changing and doing something completely different. In terms of managing your careers, that you want to be very clear about choosing the right companies to go and work for. And particularly in tech, there's a lot of tech companies do a great job of marketing themselves. They do great socials. They look like great places to go and work, and just raise so much money in funding and so on. But a lot of that is you need to look under the hood to actually understand what's going on there. And so the things that you want, especially in an early stage of your career, and it changes a little bit as you become more experienced and have your own, have a stronger skill set. But especially early stage of your career, you want to be going and working for companies where there's experienced leadership and you're working for an experienced leader. What's happening a lot in South Africa at the moment is a lot of kind of UK companies are hiring, say, SDRs remotely. And the reason they're doing it is because they are startup organizations. They want to spend as little money as possible hiring SDRs. So they will hire in South Africa and they're cheap. The problem is the leadership in those businesses, you may well be their first or second sales hire. And they are actually learning how to manage and train salespeople. And you are going to be paying the price for their learning. Okay. So what you really want to be doing is you want to be working for businesses where they are where you have experienced leadership and experienced leaders who you're going to learn from, who are going to accelerate your career, not slow your career down, because they are still on a learning curve. You also want to be thinking about product market sales fit. So if you guys are in the tech space already, the concept of you understand product market fit, which means you have a product that is a good fit for the market. And what that means generally, the way of looking at that is how many times has a company sold this product, and are they reliably selling it to the certain types of companies? And that's generally when you've got product market fit. Product market sales fit is taking that a step further, where they've got product market fit and they have an established sales process. And that, as a salesperson, is going to make your life a lot easier if you can come in and you are able to execute on a well understood process, as opposed to come in and have to figure this stuff out for yourself, because it's super, super hard. Even if a company's got a great product, but they don't know how to do sales in an early stage of your career where you're trying to build your own experience, having to figure the stuff out from scratch is really not great. And that is often, and in a place like South Africa, that's a big risk, because often there's a very low level of sales maturity in any business. that also links to like company DNA and ways of working. And if you go and work for a great business, you're just going to learn things that are like ingrained to the way the business does things. So I'll give you an example I give to my team is like, we in society today now, everybody knows that you basically wash your hands for hygiene, and that means that we don't get sick for various reasons. Now, similarly, and that's just like a basic automatic behavior that everybody has, and we've been taught to do that. It's a similar thing if you go into the right company. There'll be DNA ways of working. You might not even realize that that's like a way of working because it's just second nature to everybody in that business. But you want to be going to businesses where there's really strong DNA, so you learn the right ways of working from early on. Other things you want to be thinking about is what's the market size or opportunity? Is there actually a big enough market for me to go and make sales into? So if you're selling big banking solutions to banks in South Africa, you're only going to have 5 or 6 banks you can make sales to. So something else you want to think about. And then lastly, also something that makes your life a lot easier in sales is if a company's got a great brand or there's great brand awareness, because you have materially different conversations when companies trust you because you've kind of got that brand cover fire. I'm very interested to hear from the audience if there's anything that I'm saying here that is controversial for you guys or is different from what you expected. All right, so I'm going to move on and say kind of common mistakes in managing your sales career and just run through those. So job hopping. So I kind of talked about building tenure. The other side of it is where you're hopping jobs. And I think what happens is like you're making your CV look bad, and like many companies will just not consider you if you have less than a certain amount of tenure in certain roles. But I think the other critical thing to also take into consideration is that you basically, when you move a role from one sales organization to another, you are starting from scratch in terms of you've got to build your pipeline, you've got to hit your numbers, you've got to build credibility. And so you don't have opportunity, you're not going to have opportunities coming your way for a while when you move organizations. So people who are just moving roles all the time, they're continuously setting themselves back. And the flip side, you see the people who really go places in their career are people who stay in one company for a longer period because the opportunities come to them because they have that trust and credibility in the organizations where they are. I think throwing away valuable skills and knowledge, you want to be very deliberate about when you move companies to say, hey, am I building on the skill set, knowledge set that I've already kind of created? And then obviously I spoke about how to pick the right company, but also I think picking the wrong companies, you want to make sure they've got product market sales fits. You don't want to be working with immature sales leaders. You don't want to be selling a product that is hard to sell, And so the trap that many people fall into is like, oh, they're such a cool, well-funded startup. They've raised so much money. Or like another classic that you'll hear maybe when you're talking to a sales manager is trying to hire you. Oh, we've got more opportunities that we can handle right now. You want to test those things. You want to make sure that you actually want to make sure that like you are, you want to make sure that the stuff is actually true. And it could be that they've just got a bunch of sales opportunities now, but in 3 months, you're going to have a completely empty pipeline. I think something else just to think about in terms of hard to sell product is that you don't want to be selling like a commoditized product. So for instance, like if you're going to go and sell project management tooling, there are hundreds of project management tools out there. It's like there's so many of these, nobody really cares and they all do the same things. Like, do you want to be selling that? Like, why is somebody going to buy your product over another? It makes sales really, really hard. So I think that's really something that you want to think about. And yeah, another thing is like, if it's a small tapped out market that you're selling into, like how much opportunity is there for you to make money? And then I think this one, the last point might be the most controversial for you guys. So please fire away with questions or argue with me on this one as well. But I think that also there's a thing around selecting the right role for the right life stage as well, because if you think about kind of buying behavior, like somebody say working in a bank who's in their 50s or 60s, they're going to be at a very specific life stage, and who they relate to, who they're going to trust. Are they going to trust like a 25-year-old to sell them a 2 million rand like piece of software? So those are things that you want to be thinking about, like what's the right role for me to be doing at a given stage. And like, I think having spoken to a lot of sales leaders, they often see like a very high failure rate from SDR to AE, and even for SDRs have really shot the lights out. And I think often it's a case of there's a bit of a gap, and some of that gap might just be to kind of life stage, life experience that someone has at a certain point that enables them to relate to buyers. So for my personal experience was that I found that until the age of like 20, probably until the age of 27 or so, I probably could not relate well to somebody who's in their, mid 30s, 40s, 50s, had kids, family, home loan, car loan, those sorts of things, because I was in such a different life stage. And I really do think that makes a difference when you are doing sales in terms of your ability to understand your buyer and also to have credibility with them. So that essentially kind of covers the presentation that I had today in terms of managing your sales career and figuring out your sales career. And so, but I think guys, you please, like, we've got another 10 minutes left. So, very happy for you guys to fire away with questions, put your videos on, unmute yourselves, and I'm more than happy just to answer any questions that you have about building a sales career. So it seems like nobody has. Go for it, Jackie.
I was just going to say, I think I should just keep myself unmuted. I just want to ask you something.
Yeah.
I was in the logistics industry, so I was actually key accounts, and then I did new business as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of customers saying, okay, well, if you can't do this for me, I'll just go to 10 other people that can do the same thing. And now I'm starting with a company, but it's fleet IT, so it's fleet management system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm now in an industry where I think there's not many people out there that do this.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you have for me going into this now, where it's, I would say, less competition, but yeah.
So, I mean, first off, less competition is fantastic because it makes life easier to sell. Makes it easier to sell. I think the biggest thing in my experience is so what you're now going and doing is you're selling like previously you were kind of selling like a horizontal service, right? Anybody can use logistics. Well, now you're selling fleet management, which is much more specific to certain industries. So you're selling a vertical solution. Thing around a vertical solution generally is that there's the key there is that you've got like specialist and deep domain knowledge in helping companies or specific types of companies solve a very specific problem. And so I think the big thing there is to actually, the thing that's going to be the biggest driver for success is your ability to go and get the knowledge to really understand the industry in depth, understand your buyers in depth, understand the specific pains around fleet management and the technicalities of that. And in a world where you have that, you're then able to be super confident in your interactions with people and then be a very effective seller. And that's what we find is that, like, in a world where there's complexity, like one of the biggest drivers of success and confidence is just getting to grips with the domain knowledge that's required.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, it does, really, actually. Thank you so much.
Cool. Any other questions from our audience? Okay, so I do not think we have any more questions here.
I'll ask you a question.
Yes.
Another one. What did you do before this role? So you said that you were in sales before.
I fell into, so my first sales job was in recruitment. So I fell into like a job in recruitment between ski seasons when I was in my 20s, and I just happened to be really good at it. And then I found, and recruitment is like a pure sales job. And then I founded a recruitment agency here in South Africa. Then after I exited that business in 2015, I went and worked in a number of tech businesses, either kind of working full time or consulting to them, helping them figure out sales and kind of go to market.
Okay. And then can I ask you, if you're building like your pipeline, what indicates that a prospect is likely to be in that market for now? Is that just obviously based on industry knowledge?
So how do you mean, if they're actually looking to buy or what?
Yes, actually buy into the product.
Okay, so I mean, they say that at any point in time, only like 5 to 10% of your kind of market is actually kind of on a buying journey. But if you're trying to figure that out, you, again, like one of the things you want to be having in terms of like how you get equipped by the companies, you want to have something called a qualification framework. So that's like, I don't know if you've heard of BANT or ANIM or MEDIC, which is basically you have a structured set of questions that you're typically going to ask people at different stages of your process to establish whether they are actually a good, if this is an opportunity that's worth spending your time on. So like an example of BANT is like, it's like budget, authority, need, timeline. But the kind of more modern version of it is ANIM, authority, need, urgency, money. So you start off with like the person. Authority, am I talking to the right person who can actually make decisions and has the right problem? Need, do they actually have a problem that like aligns with something that we can solve? Urgency, like, is this something that they actually need to fix now? And then lastly, do they have the money, or is this a big enough priority that they can go and find that money? And what you do is like, you actually need a framework where specific to your sales motion in your business, where you have a standard set of questions that enables you to establish that. And so you don't necessarily, you figure those things out over the interactions that you have with a prospect over the sales process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Cool. All right, everybody. So I think we are going to wrap things up. But thank you so much for attending. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions after the session as well. Thank you.